Hi, I'm Ron with Dirtbike Magazine, and we are really excited to have this bike here today. This is the 2023 Husqvarna TX300. This is a completely new platform for Husqvarna. It's going to be the model for all the bikes going forward in the two-stroke range for the foreseeable future. That's because the fuel injection system has been completely changed. In addition to that, it's a new platform. It's very similar to the frame and the rear suspension design that has been used on KTM and Husqvarna 4-strokes in 2023.
This bike represents a whole new direction in two-stroke engineering. Up front, it has a new frame, restyled bodywork, and redesigned rear suspension. But all of that is somewhat of a distraction from the real point. The motor was completely redesigned with one thing in mind: to accommodate throttle body fuel injection. All previous EFI two-strokes have been adaptations to existing motors. So it's only been 5 years since Husqvarna and KTM came out with their first EFI two-strokes, which were all transfer port injection. Now they've gone back to throttle body injection, which seems to be older technology. Does that mean TPI was a failure? Husqvarna's people say no, and point out that TPI is still used on the TE300. The nature of that design provides a very smooth power delivery, which is perfect for the more trail-oriented TE. In the last 5 years, both designs have been in continual development. Now, throttle body injection has developed to the point that it comes closer to the original goal, which is to have a more carburetor-like power delivery. That translates to a more aggressive nature, which is appropriate for the TX300, which is a cross-country race bike. It also solves the problem of how to lubricate the crankshaft. With TPI, oil injection was necessary. By moving the injectors upstream, the crank and rod bearings are lubricated by oil mixed in the gas, which seems to be the way two-stroke purists like it. Setting the issue of fuel injection aside, the rest of the motor is new too. The electronic power valve is now controlled by the same CPU that alters the fuel mixture and the spark advance. It has to be the most complicated multi-dimensional map ever. Like most of Husky's new bikes, the TX300 got a new frame, although it is different from the one used for the 4-strokes. We think it must be lighter because the TX300 didn't gain weight like all those other bikes. On our scale, without fuel, it weighs 224 pounds, which is the same weight as last year's version. The suspension is basically the same as that used by the motocross bike, just revalved for off-road use. It has slightly less suspension than its counterpart in the KTM line, the 300XC. That's to reduce seat height. So, for our first experience on this bike, we're going to take it around a very worn-in race course that was used for the 24 hours of Glen Helen last week. You can tell from the first time you open the throttle that something is different with this bike. It really barks. The power delivery is right now when you gas it. There's no spool up time, no waiting for it to clear its throat. As advertised, it feels sort of like a carbureted motocross bike, but not quite. Most carbureted MX bikes that we're used to are 250s, which can be a handful with kind of an on or off nature. The TX's extra displacement makes it more controllable. It is more powerful and more aggressive than last year's TPI TX300, but it's very manageable and responds well to partial throttle openings. One aspect of the new TX300 is just like last year. At low RPM, it's unstoppable. You can take it up the gnarliest, rockiest hills and let the revs drop to nearly idle speed without issue. It won't stall unless you make it stall. Even a TPI bike will load up somewhat if you ride continuously at such low RPM. Likewise, an older Husky 300 will surge and even detonate slightly in some situations, especially when they get hot. The throttle body bike is always spot on as far as fuel mixture goes. We did experience a moment where the bike stumbled a little at high RPM, but it passed and we couldn't really duplicate that issue. We finally come to terms with the new Husky frame and appreciate its strengths and weaknesses. It's stiffer, which results in a negative first impression, based purely on comfort. After you ride it a little longer, you realize that it's more stable at speed and has less chassis movement. It still initiates turns with very little effort and has less squat under acceleration. Plus, we've learned once you get a little more time on the frame, it loosens up a little and the rigidity becomes less of a factor. We still like the TX's suspension overall. It handles big impacts extremely well, and you can fiddle with the air fork to your heart's content. But if the TX has any real room for improvement, it's in the suspension department. We know there are a number of aftermarket kits and tuners who can improve both the front and the rear dramatically. We're pretty sure that the Husky TX300 is the prototype for all the two-strokes moving forward. We know we're facing big political challenges in the near future, but at this point, two-strokes and four-strokes are more or less in the same boat. The fact remains that two-strokes are so important to Husqvarna that development has been non-stop all this time. The TX is an undeniable improvement, and we're certain that it came with a substantial investment. Check back with us as we learn more about the TX300. And as always, check us out at dirtbikemagazine.com. And thanks for watching.